You are now tuned in to DameSmiff.
Welcome to episode 14 of Musician Talks with DameSmiff. Before we start, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. You know how that goes. Let anybody you know join this conversation, especially if they're artists, creatives, want to get into the music industry, want to get creative with themselves, or just generally want to experience what it's like to be an artist. And today's topic, I want to talk to you guys about traveling as an artist. Specifically musicians, but it's kind of all-encompassing when you speak about artistry in general. Now, traveling for a musician and an artist are very similar in the sense that you're essentially looking for work wherever it comes and approaching it professionally wherever it comes. Now, as a musician, this can be a little different from your typical artist, whereas the equipment and things like that may vary depending on how much or how expensive it gets. But I want to talk first about how artists think about traveling on average. For me personally, I was never landlocked into a situation or a state or anything like that. So I got to travel a lot, and I was open to traveling a lot. Whereas a gig could be 2 hours, 3 hours away, and didn't mind making that drive to make the gig. Whereas some artists, I would say not even artists, just people in general, they have this, they call it a small town mindset where home is home, why leave, you know what I'm saying? But the problem with that as an artist is, especially if you want to exploit your artwork, is you got to get it into the hands of people, on your own accord, because trusting a vehicle or anything, vehicle meaning like a website or social media platform or your friends or word of mouth or things like that, aren't as reliable as you doing it yourself. Now, what that means is a lot of your performances and things like that are going to come in the form of what you may not expect it to be. A lot of artists, when they do their shows, even their first shows, they want to get a consistent, attendance, be it like 10 tickets, 15 tickets, 20 tickets, 30 tickets or whatever. But your first 10 shows may have only 3 people and less. And them 3 people you probably don't know and had to actually market to. And then when they show up, they realize there's only 2 other people there to attend the show. But the reason you do that is because the idea is that your exploitation will work alongside your traveling. So if you can get really good at traveling and managing getting around the world essentially as an artist, this can be beneficial tenfold on top of your work as an artist individually. Now, the downside to traveling is that you're kind of at the mercy of nature. Like, your flights may get delayed, you may get a flat tire, you may get sick if you're not up on your health, things like that. You may get fatigued. Like, I hear many times bands or jazz musicians, rappers, whatever, they're doing 10, 20, 30 shows, 50 shows a year, probably more, and you kind of get tired. You just get exhausted from all the traveling, keeping up with yourself. Mentally, you get exhausted. But it's important to work on these things, honestly, before you get on the road, so you can have stamina, and the things you do need to work on the road are that much more manageable. Now, when it comes to traveling too, as an artist, you got to think about what it is you're bringing when you travel. Some people travel very differently, just on their personal life. Like, when people go on vacation, people want to bring home to the vacation. Some people drop everything at home and pack light and just bring, the essentials and things like that. So it's important to understand where you keep it, where you would like to keep your mindset when it comes to traveling as an artist. So just think to yourself, like, if I'm going to a gig, let's say I live in Washington, D.C. or nearby, right? And my gig is in Chicago, and it's financially sound, like it's worth doing the gig. Like, you could drive there, you could take the train, whatever, however you want to get there, right? But what are you bringing when you get there? This is where like I said, getting good at traveling and learning how to manage travel is important. So if you're going from DC to Chicago, you want to think about how you're going to get there, like the actual transportation, plane, vehicle, whatever it is. And then next, what you're going to bring, meaning, the stipulations of whatever transportation you're taking, because it's different from a plane to a bus to a whatever. Next, you want to think about, well, along with those traveling restrictions, what would I need as an artist? And what would I want as an artist? And what are some tools that I can bring as an artist? Because what you may need may not necessarily be what you will bring on stage to network or to even just uphold your brand in general. So it's important to think about and identify those things. Honestly, if you're going to be doing full-time traveling, make a list, make a checklist that you have, and fine-tooth comb through it and make sure it's to your liking, and tweak it as you go. You may not need as much as you thought, or you may need a little more, but see what it is. Now, with all that being said, you still have to think about how much you're bringing, what you're bringing, how much it'll weigh, because the first thing I learned was the reason a lot of large performance groups and things like that, they don't fly when they have the opportunity not to, is because it's expensive to bring all that equipment onto an airplane, and it's generally just heavy. And you would typically find like groups like that getting on trains or buses and things like that, and the luggage may be a little less expensive, but it's easier to protect as well. Now, speaking of protection too, the things you're bringing, can you protect them? Like, some people bring their pets on vacation or to their their destination, and while you're on stage, who's going to be watching Fluffy the cat or feeding him and things like that? Some people bring their children, some people bring their wives and cousins and family and things like that, and that can be an issue, or it can be a positive depending on how you've managed it. Now, how can that be an issue? An issue can be that you're going to this destination for work. When you get there, you're going to be working. If you bring individuals that are coming with you that are not working, their demands and expectations are not going to be in alignment of someone who's going to be working. I'll give you an example. I won't even use traveling in this one. I actually learned this from a studio engineer, but this is little to do with traveling, but more to do with what you need to bring and how to identify what to bring when traveling. So I've heard studio engineers say, no girlfriends in the studio, wife, anything like that, none of them. Because what happens is, if the artist comes in, let's say it's a rock band that comes in, right? The rock band comes in, and the reason they book the session is so that they can record their studio album, mix it, and leave out with a product, which is their album, right? They've already practiced the music, so that's not even a question. But what happens is, when you bring the girlfriend, or on the flip side, the boyfriend, the cousins or the entourage or whoever else that's piggybacking off of your event or gig or what studio session or whatever it is, that person has the propensity to insert themselves because they are there. It's not a matter of right or wrong. It's just a matter of circumstance in some cases. Like, they will insert themselves as far as their presence, and that can disrupt work. So, for example, if the rock band that's doing their studio session is currently recording, and let's say it's a 9-hour session, by hour 4, Tom, the drummer, his girlfriend's hungry, but y'all didn't schedule the break into hour 6, but it's hour 4. So there comes the human aspect where you have to either address that, that want or need from this individual, or ignore it and risk whatever consequence comes with that. And for this studio engineer who was explaining this to me, he said it's easier to just remove that entire option of having to deal with or break up the cycle of a session, it's a lot easier to just remove that than to have to deal with it, because the outcome is nothing you can really control. Like, you can't manage that, because some girlfriends or boyfriends or whatever, they're super cool in the studio and super helpful, and sometimes stay out of the way and just are like a fly on the wall, and it's super smooth. But then on the other hand, they're very, like I said, demanding or very present with themselves, and that can disrupt people who are in here to work. And you can't control how that person's going to react to whatever it is you're presenting to them. So this is important to traveling, because I've noticed, let's say in particularly hip hop, people will bring their entourage or sometimes family members, wives and children on tour with them, with the idea that we're all unified to do the same thing. But the caveat is that these people that they're bringing are not here to work, or they're not hired or expected to work. So therefore, their expectations of what this destination may be for them as an individual is different for the artist or the professionals involved. Because you may have, a team or whatever, plus your family and, close, like you may bring, your wife and things like that. But that's something to think about when it comes time to think about managing an artist while traveling. So if you're going to out of state, you now have to make sure people have gotten their vaccinations, their shots. They can legally travel. They have what they need. They're not bringing more than what they need. You have to do this as an artist to make sure that everybody is on the same accord. Because traveling in groups is similar to being the captain of a ship, in a sense. Like, there has to be direction, there has to be a leader, and there has to be clear communication and transparency. Because if you bring somebody out of the country that has a different motive than you, and honestly they haven't communicated it, you will find out when they get there, which is not when you want to find out people have a different motive than you and you expected that they did. And again, as an artist, you want to get really, really good at this before you start traveling, because if you're traveling already and you don't understand these concepts, or as I'm saying them, you're learning them and you're already in your traveling, you have that much more catching up to do in order to maintain order in your artistry and traveling with it. So it's something to keep in mind about what you're bringing, why you're bringing it, and whether or not you need it. Another thing too, and this is bigger, well, they say it's bigger on female artists and musicians. The upkeep when it comes to traveling can be a little higher for women. And that's simply because the imaging that society puts on women, it's something that women have to think about, which in turn means if this female artist or band has a manager or a tour manager, this is something to think about. It's a real thing. Some women need their obviously their feminine products that they need to have, and on other hands, it's the beauty standard that these women want to uphold. Maybe it's not, the beauty standard, but it's one that they have for themselves. And in order to maintain that, they're going to need the things that they need. And how will you consistently be able to manage that on a 40-date tour and things like that, along with the very things that I explained before, which could be, some may have boyfriends, some may have exes, some may have certain dietary restrictions, some may have not necessarily a lifestyle, but a physical, like, maintenance requirement. Like, some girls and guys even, they need to exercise to relieve stress. They need rest. They need, the best high quality foods to eat to keep them on their A game. You can't just pull up to any gas station and give them $20 and let them buy what they want. And then on top of that, some people, men and women equally, don't know what they need. They might be 28 and just now figuring out that, oh shit, maybe I do need to kind of incorporate yoga into what I'm doing, because I'm spending, 13 hours a damn near week on a bus, plus working, plus in the hotel, plus, you know, if you're doing whatever extracurricular networking or social media or radio interviews or whatever else, you're doing a lot of physical work. So you have to learn how to decompress that. And you got to learn, how do you get that? Is it going to be expensive? Do you come out of pocket? Could you write it off? Things like that. But this is all important and all to think about just to travel. You didn't even get to the part where you've gotten on stage yet. This is just to maintain your health and your mental capacity as you are traveling. Now, when I was younger, I was in college and I was in the marching band, and we did traveling pretty much up and down the Northeast coast. We didn't go further than, I think, like the Carolinas. But that kind of traveling without thinking about it was putting a toll on us. But we had enough, you know, experience in our leadership to lead us in the right way to where we were eating consistently. We were getting enough rest and things like that. Even sometimes we had, we had people grouped together to go exercise together to keep ourselves fit and things like that. So think about traveling as another leg of your performance, if that makes sense, because you don't want to have to travel in a bus or in a train or whatever, 6 hours to a destination, and your gig is in 2 hours when you get there, and you haven't rested at all on the trip, you haven't eaten, and you still haven't, like, you know, gotten yourself individually, physically, and mentally prepared to perform. Because by the time you get to the performance, you're going to be out of sync. You're not going to be able to perform at your fullest. And I want to talk about how artists view traveling, because as I just explained, you want to think of it as another leg of your performance. Some people think, I would say people, this isn't just an artist thing, but some people think of their commute and traveling as something separate from the work that they do, and they use it as a kind of a crutch to not do what they're supposed to do. Some people do this. So an example, somebody could say, oh, I have to drive 45 minutes to work. I don't have time to eat. That doesn't make sense. It can't make sense for you to say that and then expect to perform 100% at your job. Now, to put that in an artist perspective, you have to get to the airport and go from, let's say, DC to Texas. You got to go to Houston, right? When you're making that flight, on the flight, from the airport to the plane to the second airport that you land to, there are opportunities for you to rest, eat, exercise. There's a lot of opportunities for you to get all these things off if you prioritize them. Whereas other artists, because I've done this in my travels, it wasn't for work, but I've noticed it when someone explained the difference between someone who's traveling for leisure and business. But when I was traveling for leisure, I realized that the way I was traveling was kind of just flowing with whatever happened. Like if my flight was delayed by 30 minutes or an hour, it was just, oh, okay, well, it is what it is. And if I was hungry and if I didn't see anything I liked and wanted, I wouldn't eat. Therefore, when I got to my destination, I'd be starving, hoping that I'd find something that I wanted to eat. And that would, if I was traveling for business, both of those things would eat at my performance. Meaning, if my flight gets delayed on a business traveling instance, I need to start making phone calls and adjustments to my schedule, because everything's going to be pushed forward or back. I'm not sure how that works. But, and then on the other hand, if I'm in the airport and I haven't eaten and I know my next flight is 3.5 hours or 4 hours, and the only thing they're going to give me on the plane is probably like 8 ounces of soda and some cookies, I need to eat. I don't have a taste for this. And it's like, I need the caloric energy to suffice and make it through this trip. Hopefully pick something else up if I got time when I get there. But at the end of the day, I need the energy, so that way when I do land, I'm not physically and mentally starved in a sense. So keeping that in mind is very, very, very important. and understanding that when you're traveling as an artist for work, you're traveling for work. A lot of artists, they treat it as a grand opportunity to kind of vacay, and I would take it even further to say you shouldn't do this even if it is kind of like a leisure situation as an artist. And a good example of that is if you've been invited to an award show, do a walkthrough, or just, to network. If it has anything to do with your brand or business, treat it as such. Unless it's, you're putting up your own money to go to a destination you want to go to. If someone's, inviting you on the pretense of your work or your artistry and things like that, treat it as such. So, to give you another example, if you've been invited to go see the Grammys, and it's to the point to where it all expense paid, like they're paying for your food, board, travel, and things like that, you shouldn't treat it as though it's a vacation because it's, all paid for and it's not necessarily a performance gig. You're just kind of going to a networking event. That's essentially what the Grammys are. Because you would still have to have that kind of image about yourself that you're 100%. It would suck if you got to the Grammys and somebody were to ask you, "Hey, are you tired?" and looking at you like you're off and you thought you were doing your best. So it's important to think about that. So yeah, I've touched on what you need, why you need, what you need, why you need it, and this, and also determining those two things, like determining what you need and why you need it. Now, the last thing I'll touch on is traveling should never supersede your quality. So I've heard when I was coming up as a musician to make sure you have a show before you take your show on the road. Whereas you'll see some artists, they'll have songs, music, collections, and things like that. And the thinking is, I have enough music that time-wise would equate to, let's say, a set of an hour of music, right? So let's take this on the road and start going on stage. And quickly you'll realize that the difference between those who are performing music and the difference between those who are performing music and those who are showcasing music is having a show. Now, those who perform their music, I would identify it like this. You get on stage, you press play or you start playing, and you perform your song from beginning to end. It ends. The next song cues up. You perform that song from beginning to end, and it ends. Versus a showcase where you're showcasing your talent, not just performing music. So if your talent is singing, then you would be picking from your collection of music the songs that present your singing in the best light. You wouldn't just be playing your hour of music, right? And with that, you would also be showcasing the talent of either the musicians around you, how you perform, the talent of your ability to control the ceremony or the crowd or audience and things like that. So that's the big difference. Now, it may work sometimes. Like I know this kind of works for DJs in a sense where you can, have your set list or just a collection of songs that you're going to mix through and things like that. But that's not what people come for when they want a show. When they want a show, they want to see you. So it's not necessarily the sounds and the beats and things like that. They want to be enthralled in a show, not a performance, but a show. And when it comes to traveling, some artists don't pick up on that at first. You kind of pick up on it when you see bigger names and bigger productions. You kind of understand that, okay, there's way more pieces moving here than, the musicians and the music being received by listeners. There's sound men, there's lights, there's promoters, there's an ambiance, there's the venue itself, there's security, there's a cultural difference. You might be in a different country. There's a lot of things that go into making a show for an audience versus them just seeing you perform the music that you recorded. Now, taking that on the road can be super, super detrimental or beneficial depending on where you found yourself. Do you even have a show? So if you do have a show and you believe you're ready to take it on the road, then you're in a better position than those who don't, because the things that you would need to fix on, you wouldn't have as much to catch up with. So you can have a complete show, but you may not have endurance. You may have booked yourself for a 2-show weekend and you've never done that before. And by the time you finish your second show, you're exhausted and you only have maybe 4 or 5 days until your next show to recuperate. So that's something to think about. Like, are you a 2-show in a weekend type of artist? Or if you're not, could you get to that point? And how could you get to that point? Something to think about. And if you don't have a show, then you basically are in ground zero. But if you can identify that you don't have a show, you already know what you're working on. But the way you can tell you don't have a show and you're already traveling is when you can't recall the set list. That's how I would determine it, because I've done performances where we didn't necessarily have like a show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We just kind of made a set list, pretty much like the week of the venue, or maybe 2 weeks of the gig. And would rehearse and then come up, and then the next show we repeat that process. But what that does is it creates an inconsistency in the performances and for the audience. So one audience got maybe this performance of a song that was amazing and it was a song they liked, but then when they went to your next show, the next time you came in, you didn't play it, because that's just not how that set list goes. Now, I do understand that a lot of people prefer variety in their performances, but it's just important to understand that you're only changing the variety, and you're not affecting the overall show. So to keep it in a kind of elementary sense, in marching band, when you have a field show or things like that, essentially there's a set list of songs, movements, and formations that all are synced up in time, to where you have a certain window of time, like the halftime show or something like pep rally, where you would have all the musicians perform those songs, and then by the end they would be off the stage or whatever, or the field. Now, in marching band, you would have probably about 4 of those complete shows that, as an entire band, you all understand and perform. And practice together. So when it is time to perform, you can go to your individual leaders and say, we're doing show number, let's say 3. Everybody knows what the entire set list is, all the movements and all the formations, because you've been practicing it and it's down pat. Versus, like, if your band director is calling out songs the day or week of the performance every week, that kind of inconsistency doesn't develop a specific brand and a bad consistency for the audience. Whereas when people want to recall the performance of the show, they don't have any what's the word? They don't have any mutual relationship as far as it goes with other fans who have seen your performance in different places. So it's important to think about that. Now, to put it in an extreme sense, you can think about Kanye West's Yeezus tour. Even a lot of I would say like a Tech Nine show. A lot of the bigger acts tend to have this consistently down. But as they go from place to place, we'll take the Yeezus tour, for example. The stage was itself. Like, they brought the stage with them. So everywhere that it was performed, the visual was similar. Now, the set list may have a little bit of alteration, but the overall direction and movement and things like that of the show all were consistent with one another. So then, when everybody who attended, wherever they were, recall this performance, there's key points and things like that we can all identify, versus just a jumble of music. Now, what that does too is it all the people who've enjoyed pieces of that show have kind of multiplied each other. They all kind of maybe agree on the highs and the lows of the show. This is where, as an artist, you can tweak if you want to keep this show going. You can tweak and improve on things on a greater scale, because you will know on a massive scale what works and on a massive scale what doesn't. Now, to tie this back into traveling, being consistent in your traveling too is a good way to build up that endurance as an artist. And me explaining how a show is different from a performance, and you identifying that you have a show, will help you so much more in your traveling, because you have not less to think about in your show, but it's manageable now. Because if you're an artist, let's say, excuse me, like Snoop Dogg, he has a lot of music from various genres, times, sounds, and artists and things like that. There's so much intertwining work that goes into that large catalog of music that if he were to come to your city, what do you think? What do you expect him to play? You know what I'm saying? So what happens with, I'm assuming, I don't know, I'm not in their camp, but what I'm assuming is they have a general list of songs that they know will get good reception from their fans based on their experience, and obviously the ones they're not going to pick, but they also have to consider why they're performing, or why they're performing at this particular location. So if Snoop Dogg goes to Haiti, he has some worldly sounding music where it's not so, culturally shocking, but at the same time, he can still kind of represent himself, because he knows that he has music that he's played consistently in different places that people do gravitate to positively. And you can, like I said, with the Yeezus thing, that's where you can get the tweaking and things like that. So if Snoop Dogg were to take his same show and go to, let's say, New York, you can guarantee on those tracks that you've already solidified to get positive reactions from the audience, as well as you may be able to have, because his catalog is so large, you may have songs that this particular demographic may like a little more than those on the West Coast or down south or even out of the country and things like that. But you get that, again, from being consistent and understanding and analyzing what it is you need and what it is that you want. Because I'm sure Snoop has music that he would love to just get on stage and perform, but you do it and it's, so out of place, it's received incorrectly. And that's important. And this is important to traveling, because this honestly goes right into traveling. So if you are traveling long distances and things like that, and you're not taking care of your health consistently, and you don't know where to improve on, and you honestly don't have a rubric on what improvement is, it can be very, very hard to identify what to work on as an artist and how to improve traveling. Because, again, thinking of traveling one way can make or break you physically and mentally, because traveling comes for different reasons. Traveling comes for different purposes and places and things like that. And as an artist, you have to be malleable in understanding these things and being not really aggressive, but assertive in addressing these things for yourself as an artist. Some labels and management are very hands off with travel. They assume you have the experience. Don't allow somebody to assume your experience, especially if you know you don't have it, because that's kind of setting you up for failure versus providing guidance. Like for me personally, I've been able to travel young, but I've had supervision while traveling, so I know what and not to do in certain instances. Whereas on the other hand, I haven't traveled like that in a long time, so things may have changed. So then if I were to start doing short length trips and things like that just throughout the different states and things like that, I would have to adjust a little bit just to get used to what has changed. Whereas I've had experience with traveling for business as well as leisure. Whereas if someone has always traveled for leisure, gets the opportunity to travel for business, the odds of them treating it like a leisure trip are very high. And you have the opportunity to kind of have a lot of prioritized um, aspects of your traveling pushed to the wayside, like your exercise, your diet. You may be eating food you see because you've never been to this place before and it just looks exciting, versus eating what you know you need to perform your best at your show. Now, going back to the difference between a show and a performance, the reason that is important and how they're intertwined is that if I have 10 shows, whatever, lined up, like a short tour, and 7 of those shows are amazing, but maybe the last 3 I'm a little exhausted, and exhaustion comes warped and distorted like perception, and my decision making gets worse. So now I'm not exercising. Maybe because I'm exhausted, I have low energy levels. And because I have low energy levels, I'm not thinking clearly. So now I'm eating food based on emotion because of, I just want to feel good and do that. Or let's take it even further. Your tour is going so well, it's almost over. You probably got 2 more dates left. You start celebrating a little early and you start to indulge in, whatever it is, your vices. The next 2 shows are going to show the results of those decisions. And if people who see you on stage are like, man, you're like sluggish, or you're kind of acting a little different, or like a little weird right now, what's going on? That sits with fans, especially if you're traveling to places you've never been. That's their impression of you, literally, until you come back and prove them wrong. And that takes for both you and the fan to do that work, to come together to do that, versus you just putting on a great performance and they have almost nothing bad to say about it other than they want more of you. That impression, they're not going to be working to improve that. They're typically fine with having a good impression on you. So just keep that in mind as an artist, especially when you're out here networking and things like that. I guess I could touch on another thing when it comes to traveling, networking. As you're traveling, you don't know who you're going to be talking to. And with that, you can't control it either. So what you can control is who everybody else is going to be talking to, which is you. So if everybody's going to be talking to you, what do you want to present? So be it in the airport, the hotel lobby, the parking lot when you guys are loading up equipment, after the show, wherever it is, what do you want these people that you're traveling to see to get from you? Whereas I've had shows where excuse me, I've had shows where after the show, almost immediately we left. That's fine, but in some cases, some people, would prefer to have kind of a personal, or, just a conversation, just to kind of meet you. And with that, people will draw their own conclusions on you. And on the other hand, when people have met me before, they were like, oh, Mal, you guys are amazing and nice, and I enjoyed talking to you. Here's my contact information. Let's see if we can do this again, or maybe at some point in the future, we just attend each other's shows or whatever else. We just work together. But that only happens because I've set myself up to be positively received by this other person. Some people aren't social, but they're working. So they're in places where they have to meet people, new people, and things like that. Like your bass player may not, be a social butterfly, but they might have been the star of the show, if that makes sense. So it's kind of a balancing act that you got to play. Some bands, some musicians and things like that, entourages, they'll compensate for that. They may cover for the person or try to take over the networking and social aspect of that particular individual. But it doesn't help in the long run, because eventually the person that's compensating becomes the one that everybody loves and is attracted to. And the person who's socially distant is going to be distant. And they're going to be putting in great work. Nobody can really deny your work, especially if you have the results. But if people don't like you, they're not going to book you. and the odds of you traveling are going to be reduced or limited. It's just something else to think about as an artist. There's a lot of plates you have to spin when traveling, and yeah, it goes deep into discipline, consistency, transparency, communication, as well as what's the word? I can't think of the word. There's a word that I'm thinking of where you kind of limit excess. You reduce excess in your life, and you go right into essentials and what you need for yourself to be successful. You don't bring anything extra. Like if I were to go on a tour for a music tour, um, what wouldn't I bring on a tour? Let me think about that. Like in an example, if I'm on tour, I would bring things to make new music, just to keep that that muscle going, and things to practice on. Um, I wouldn't bring distractions. I would bring things that would connect me to more people as I'm on stage. So a distraction to me would be something that kind of isolates me from other people. I'm a gamer, but I play online and I stream. So I'm constantly talking to people. Whereas other people, when they play video games, it's for like kind of therapeutic for them. It's just a release, you a quick escape from reality and things like that. But what that can cause in a situation where we need you to be almost 99% social, that can cause kind of a dependency on this thing. So you don't want to bring that when it's time to be damn near social all the time. Or another big one are obviously the vices and things like that. But that's again someone trying to. That's not a social thing you do. Like it's not something you can invite others to be a part of and things like that. So I've seen some people, they'll bring on their tour bus, they'll go to like maybe not Walgreens, Walmart, or like a sporting goods store and buy a football, a basketball and a rim, maybe a volleyball and a net. Some people have bought some weights, and I've seen that done on tour where they have like a barbell, some dumbbells, resistance bands, and things like that. Some people even hire a trainer to come on tour with them just to keep themselves fit and active, and that getting fresh sunshine and staying mobile, because sitting in plane cabins and bus cabins and things like that, it can take a toll on you. I've seen some people bring chefs. The big thing I saw one time, somebody had a tour bus, the type of tour buses where you have outlets and electricity in it, but they brought a juicer. I thought that was wild. It was like, yeah, that's actually an amazing investment to put on your tour bus. You bring a juicer, just keep your phone and ideas on where fresh fruit and vegetables are. Maybe you run into a Whole Foods, bring a blender, you got smoothies on deck, things like that. It makes eating easier, cheaper, that much more nutritious, especially if you got enough, your supplements, maybe your protein powders and hemp seeds or whatever else you want to put in there. But another thing, to kind of piggyback off of earlier when I said it's a little different for women, what would I recommend women not to bring on tour? Yeah, I think it's still simply just things that you think would, or you can prove that would isolate you from people. Like if you're one of those girls that needs to be by self most of the time, schedule that in, but don't bring things that kind of you will depend on. Like I said, if you have a thing that's therapeutically for you, but you're on a tour where, again, you have to deal with managers and things like that, to the point where people are walking in on you, and people, need your opinion on most decisions and things like that. For that to happen during the time where you want to be alone will be frustrating and can be problematic for some teams, because they need their leader to be available. And if you're not available when they need you, they won't call upon you, and you therefore won't be their leader. But what would I recommend you don't bring? I guess, yeah, just to keep it simple, just things that are in excess. Like you don't need extra. Just don't think you need extra. You need um necessities. So like if you have 10 shows and you want to wear 10 outfits as a woman, bring 12, maybe 13 outfits. Don't bring all your clothes and try to make outfits. If you understand what I'm saying, like plan the outfits for each show, plan for malfunctions, and just plan to have maybe one, two, maybe even three backups just in case. Um, Same with shoes. I notice a lot of male artists, they bring a lot of sneakers and t-shirts and hats and clothes and things like that. But you're only going to be on stage for probably 10, 15 minutes. It's not that serious. Um, what else shouldn't you bring? You don't bring vices. You don't need vices. If you have a dependency on a vice, communicate that to your team. Don't try to keep it as something that you're going to manage on your own, because it's nothing you can manage on your own. That's why it's called a vice. Um, you can set a system for it, but I would suggest, in the best sense, is to pick someone you trust, a person, because again, you want to be social. You don't want to isolate yourself while you're on tour and things like that, because it'll get you in the mindset that that's more important than leading your ship right now. But you want to pick a person that you trust to communicate that you have this dependency, or trust this person to take responsibility for your dependency, in the sense that, all right, Kyle, our electric guitar player, he's gonna go take a smoke break. Whoever Kyle has trusted should know that Kyle's on a smoke break, and how long he's going to be on a smoke break, where it is, uh, and like, things like that. Just know. You don't have to like badger a person about their smoke breaks, but at the same time, having that transparency and communication on a team while traveling is super important. I'll give you an example of, what you don't want to happen. Kyle goes on a smoke break, and the bus driver goes, all right, I just did a check with the tour manager and things like that, and it looks like traffic's about to pick up. We might have to leave early. So let's go ahead and leave in like the next, 5-10 minutes. And you can, but Kyle is on a smoke break, but no one knows where. You're going to spend some time trying to find Kyle versus having to, pack up and leave and do what you're supposed to do as far as business goes. But on the other hand, the way you can fix that is, if we know Kyle's on a smoke break, bus driver says we got to go because of traffic, the person who is entrusted by Kyle can go find Kyle and say, yo, we got to go. This is what we need to do. And again, if Kyle trusts and respects this person, he'll listen. And that's super important. Super, super important. But I guess that's the caveat too, with having the whole girlfriend and family entourage thing. You may be working with a team of people that you know professionally, but there are some people who know you on a level that's a little deeper that can help you be better. But it's hard, but you can identify those people and bring those people on tour. I would not bring all of those people, but the best of the best. That's how I would look at it. Yeah, and essentially, traveling as an artist is going to be super, super beneficial for you, especially if you haven't done it yet. You'll learn a lot. You'll meet a lot. I've played in venues I never thought I'd play in, met people that I didn't even know existed, heard sounds I never thought I knew before, learned instruments and things like that, technology. Yeah, I would just keep an open mind when it comes to traveling, because there's some places where you would read about it, like on paper it looks horrible, but the people there are so amazing. It's like, it's worth it to go and come back again and again and again. And understanding that traveling is, if you are a traveling artist, is a part of your work and your performance. It's not, don't think of it as like a corporate job commute in between your when you left the house and when you clock in. You clocked in when you left the house. And so you've been working from the drive to the airport, to boarding the flight, landing, to the hotel, from the hotel to the gig, back to the hotel, all the way back home. That's work. You've clocked in all the way in. You may not necessarily be paid for those hours, but you are working. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. But yeah, that's all I have for today. This is Musician Talks with DameSmiff, episode 14. Be sure to follow me on Facebook. I have the official Facebook page. Just type DameSmiff anywhere, Google, I don't care. And join this conversation. Share, like, subscribe. Share this with artists, musicians, anybody who wants to be an artist, join the music industry. We're just looking to understand artists and their perspective on things. And yeah, thank you.